I'm Angie Cherebeck, and I'm the Executive Director of the Bar Center.
And I am Treopia Green, Washington, and I am at Bowie, where I am fortunate enough to be employed. I am Director of Special Initiatives for the College of Education.
Treopia, you are an incredible leader. I have been following your work for quite some time. I would love if you wouldn't mind kind of starting back a little bit in your history, because you grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas.
I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I remember back, I think, when I was 2, going on 3, one of the memories I have, I had a doll, and her name was Bertha. And I told my mother it was her birthday. And she told me to take Bertha out for a stroll. And I had a baby buggy, put Bertha in it, walked up and down the sidewalk. And when I came back, my mother had baked a birthday cake for Bertha.
Oh.
I doubt if Bertha ate much of it, but I think I did.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful.
But growing up in Little Rock was absolutely wonderful. I had many, many happy memories, both with my family, my neighborhood, my church, and the schools that I attended.
Which is something I would love to talk about, because you are a lifelong educator, as we're sitting right here at a university, and you started off teaching kindergarten, but family was many, many educators. And I recall you sharing a story when you were like 3 or 4, and your mother and your aunt were involved in a lawsuit in terms of making kind of the world a more equitable place. I would love if you would share a bit about that.
Yes, I was, I think I was about 4, and my mother and aunt were part of a group of teachers at Dunbar High School who sued the Little Rock School Board for equal pay for black teachers, because at that time, black teachers were paid much less with the same credentials than other teachers. But the part that I remember most about that was that Thurgood Marshall was the lawyer who represented those teachers. And on one of his visits to Little Rock, my parents were asked to host Thurgood Marshall because, of course, at that time, we could not stay in hotels. That was against the Jim Crow laws. But at 4 years old, my mother said that Thurgood Marshall would fly into Little Rock. Of course, travel during that time was primarily by train and car. So I waited in my back window for Thurgood Marshall's plane to land in my backyard because I thought our backyard was enormous. And I was terribly disappointed when the doorbell rang and Mother announced that Attorney Marshall was here. In fact, I met his son years later and told him, I don't think I ever forgave your father for disappointing me by not flying into my backyard.
Oh my gosh.
But back to the suit that the teachers were part of. The plaintiff was someone whom they knew would be fired at the outcome of the suit, which they won. And so this group of teachers took up money to pay her salary for the coming year. And they were very successful in the suit, and they did win equal pay for themselves and other teachers.
So this is one of the many stories, like when I hear you and the work that you've done, I'm even curious. So even though you're 4 or 5 and this is happening around you and these people are staying around you, did you have a sense of how important this was, or a sense of kind of the need to be leading even at that age? Or what kind of your recollections when you were that young and this is around you?
Not really. I remember my mother, who I think now was a great philosopher. One of the things that she stressed, and she and my father both, was that you do something because it's right. You don't do anything to get recognition. If you receive recognition, that's just an extra part, but you don't do something to gain recognition. So we were brought up to believe that, or to practice things that would help not only us, but help other people.
I'm going to fast forward you because I think one of the big, things that in particular I've heard you talk about is your brother and your family's kind of work in terms of Little Rock Nine.
Yes, that he and I probably have talked more in the last couple of years than we did then, because again, my family's philosophy was that you do something because you think it's the right thing to do, but it's no big deal. So I have asked him what prompted him to accept the invitation to transfer.
Tell me, why was there an invitation to transfer? What high school did you go to, and what high school was he going to go to?
Well, I went to Dunbar High School, which was the black high school in Little Rock. And Dunbar had been the only school for many, many years, but a new high school for blacks only had opened a few years before Central became available. So my brother was going to that high school, and when the '54 Supreme Court decision passed and segregated schools were declared unequal and unlawful, and the charge was given to school systems to proceed to integrate as soon as possible. In Little Rock, the decision was made to start at the high school level. And my brother laughs now, we both do. When Dunbar was built, about the same time that Central was built, Dunbar cost around $400,000. Central cost over $1 million.
And so Central is a school for white students?
Yes, for white students only. So Ernest was saying that you don't have to be a genius to see that a school 3 times as big as yours could not offer 3 times more than your school did. So his decision to accept the invitation to integrate was based on the fact that he knew he could get more, even though our school, Dunbar, was excellent. And one of the reasons I have to interject, during that time, the professions that were available for college-educated black women either were teaching or nursing. And I always said, if you didn't like blood, then that was not your field. Nursing was not your field. But so that meant that the teachers that we experienced at the black high school could have been CEOs at any Fortune 500 company. They were just that good. But again, the physical limitations of the school provided the background that Ernest and the other 9 needed when they were given the opportunity to transfer.
So what year did Ernest transfer in high school?
It was 1957, and he was the only senior.
Okay, so he's transferring his senior year.
Yes.
And he's the only one.
Yes, yes.
Was your family anxious? Were they nervous? Was there discussion about this?
Yeah, he said that our mother and our father had passed a couple of years before that. That our mother said, if this is what you are committed to do, we will stand behind you. And actually, during that year, there was not a lot of discussion about what could happen. However, I do remember the first day that he was to enter school, Central. I was teaching, it was in my second year, teaching kindergarten. And my principal came to my room and said, Treopia, do you know about the rioting in Little Rock? I said, the what? I said, people in Little Rock don't riot. And I was absolutely astounded when I arrived home. I was staying with a friend of my mother's whose husband was the principal in Baltimore. And we looked at television, and it just really blew my mind. And I immediately called home because I was concerned about my family. And my mother said, and she said it every time I called, don't worry about us. We are just fine. You have your kindergarten children to be concerned about. And that was it.
In terms of the rioting, when you grew up in Little Rock, the story of you kind of, pushing your doll around and having your doll received a birthday cake doesn't necessarily indicate a community that is that volatile. When you were growing up, did you kind of have a sense of that tension?
No,
Okay.
there was never, ever anything of that ilk that we experienced growing up. And as I thought about it years later, I remember reading in the Sunday paper, because I left, I had been home on vacation, and I left that Sunday, and Ernest was to enter school that Monday. But I remember seeing a headline that said that the governor of Arkansas had met with the governor of Mississippi. And for some reason, that kind of stuck in my mind. And it was reinforced because years later, people who lived near the school talked about the number of out-of-state licenses on cars that were parked near the school. So bottom line, I feel that certainly there were people in Little Rock who perhaps had a desire to do that kind of thing, but they were encouraged to a greater degree by people from the outside.
So this really came as a surprise in terms of
Yes.
in terms of going in.
Yes.
So obviously, day one, the first day, doesn't go well in terms of how long and kind of what happened next in terms of.
Well, in a day or so, they were forced, the 9 were forced out, accompanied by policemen, because the crowd had become so volatile that it became dangerous for them to be there. So for 2 weeks, they gathered at Mrs. Daisy Bates' house. Daisy Bates was the NAACP president who was kind of shepherding them. And it was just before my brother's birthday on September 22nd that the parents received a telegram from President Eisenhower stating that he was sending troops into Little Rock to accompany the students to school. And that next day, about 2 weeks later, the 1,200 troops flew into Little Rock, set up tents on the Central High School grounds, and that next morning, the students were loaded into 2 cars. There was a Jeep in front with machine guns, a Jeep behind with machine guns. And my brother said, I was told on that day, I think we will get in school today.
During that time, do you know, did Ernest question the decision? I mean, now that it's violent and all of these other, pieces, before you're like, he wanted to go to the school to have all these other opportunities, and now this has clearly become a much bigger, broader national issue. Or
No, his focus was on doing the classwork so that he could graduate in May. That was his entire focus. In fact, at one time during that year, my mother, we talked every day, and she asked him if he wanted to come to Baltimore with me, but he said, no, I'm going to stick it out.
that internal resolve, that commitment, I mean, is just such an amazing attribute, both for him, but I think for your family, the fact that your family continued to support his decision, as well as when this now clearly he is kind of leading forward a bigger path than just him having a single opportunity. The opportunities that he was forging ahead for so many others is remarkable. In school, do you know, did he have people who were supporting him? Staff that was supporting him?
One of the things that I think was so helpful to him was that his classmates at his former school always included him in everything that they did. And they were extremely supportive. The parties, the events were always things to which he was invited. And I really think that meant a lot to him, because some of the people, particularly in the neighborhood, were not so much in favor of what he was doing.
So what neighborhood? The neighborhood you live in?
Yes, in fact, our neighbor, one of the neighbors across the street, accosted him one day and said to him, in essence, what are you doing? You know, we have comfortable homes. We have it really pretty good. And here you are messing things up.
So he's having resistance from both sides in terms of this.
Yes.
But you're saying he had obviously supportive family.
Well, let's put it this way, there was more support than there was animosity. And this is what people have asked my mother, how she withstood that year. And I remember she told one person that she had faith.
Which is so necessary.
Yes.
And so beautiful.
Yes.
That's kind of what was guiding her.
And she, growing up with all of the encumbrances that we might have faced, I never once heard either she or my father or my aunt or anybody else utter any kind of hateful language. In fact, that word hate was never used in my home.
Really. So kind of amidst these turmoils, it felt like there's continues to be I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you have such a graciousness kind of around you. You have such a resolve and a strength. But that's really admirable that they didn't ever rebuttal the anger back with hate.
Now, I remember once my mother said, there should be no such thing as worry, because if you have an issue, you analyze it, decide what you can do about it, do what you can, and then leave it alone.
Very wise woman, a very wise woman, as are you. So we make it through the senior year. I'm assuming in general coursework, he's navigating relatively well, he's bright. And how about graduation? Do we actually kind of?
Well, even before graduation, there were situations. I remember once, one of the calls, my brother had prepared a project for physics. And unfortunately, the physics teacher was the only teacher who had really shown outward animosity toward his being there. So he brought the project to school, put it in his locker, and after lunch, he went to his locker to go to class. His locker had been broken into and his project destroyed. And of course, the teacher gave him a failing grade for that project. But that did not deter him, because on the other side of that, there was a doctor at the University of Arkansas Medical School who took an interest in him, and on Saturday would have him at his home to tutor him. So that balance, the bottom line was that he graduated, he finished the physics course in spite of all of the issues, and in May he graduated.
Oh, that's fantastic. So at least what I'm hearing is absolutely there's adversity, but it feels like you and others keep seeking out those that are bright spots and who are supporters, who are continuing to kind of be able to have those bright lights and know that you're not alone. I think you know so much of our work is with schools, and we're all about building relationships and building those relationships from when you talk about student to student, and Ernest and his classmates from before that kept those relationships going, and students to staff as well as those staff to staff, because I feel like those adult relationships are important both in the school and out of the school, that Ernest knew that he could be doing things that no one had done before on this national spotlight when he had not chosen this path, and then to do it with such grace is truly incredible. I know you had shared with me briefly, but his graduation did not necessarily go seamlessly, that we kind of get up here and we're going to graduate, and then you get a letter from your family and the principals advising that he not come to graduation.
Yes, his principal called, I think it was the day before graduation, to ask if he wanted his diploma mailed to him, because they had received threats that he would be shot and killed if he walked across the stage. And Ernest's response was, I did not go through this year not to let my family see me receive my diploma. And the graduation turned out to be just super. And a surprise was that our family was accompanied by Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr.
Oh, that's fantastic. So he came for Ernest's graduation?
Well, we learned that he was a speaker at a college in Pine Bluff, and he heard about Ernest's graduation and called Daisy Bates and asked her if he could attend. And he ended up going with my family. Of course, at that time, he had just begun his work, because we laugh now is that had he been as well known as he ultimately became, he probably would not have been allowed to attend the graduation. But before today, I was looking through some things and found the guest book from Ernest's graduation. And on one page was a guest, Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr., with a gift of $5 for Ernest. And all that is in this book, and of course we treasure it and we'll keep it forever.
Oh, that's wonderful. Our country in particular has been going through some tougher times lately in terms of number of things. You've lived through some remarkable times. It feels like we've made some progress and some setbacks and different, not a linear path. I'm kind of curious in terms of your thoughts in terms of that, you've gone through, not being able to go to restaurants or go to schools that are integrated, and then having things move forward, and then having these, other landscape just continuing to shift. Kind of how are you keeping your resolve, and kind of what are your thoughts in terms of moving things forward?
I think one of the first things is to do a self-analysis to see if you are doing the right thing. And once you believe that you're doing the right thing, then you just determine, as my mother said, you analyze the situation, determine what you can do about it, and do what you can, and then you leave it alone. And I think that's applicable to just about everything. But the important thing is to make sure that you are doing what you can to move things positively.
Well, you are just an absolute kind of bright light of strength and optimism and hope and faith. And so your path and the path that you've been on is so remarkable. So I will say, on a selfish note, surrounding myself by people like you is inspiring as we navigate kind of these other pieces. Well, thank you so much for everything today, and thank you so much for all your leadership that you're doing and how you're helping to change our world.
It is such a pleasure to be here, and I have to tell you, I have been so impressed with what I have read about Barr. Barr reminds me of the kinds of schools that I had the privilege of attending, your philosophies and your goals and your missions.
Thank you so much.